Hello, welcome to the Electrical Brain Stimulation Lab. In this video, I'm going to tell you how you can set up an electrical brain stimulation experiment. Before going to that, I'm going to differentiate a little bit between different types of brain stimulation ones. We have generally two types of brain stimulation that are very conventional. One is magnetic brain stimulation, which is usually called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, and we also have electrical brain stimulation, which is usually abbreviated as TES or transcranial electrical stimulation. The topic of this video today is TES or electrical brain stimulation. You might have heard about TDCS, which is the most common type of transcranial electrical stimulation, which stands for transcranial direct current stimulation. All types of electrical brain stimulation are set up the same, but the protocol of brain stimulation, the waveform, is different. That I will talk about it a bit later when I'm explaining the application of the device. In conventional electrical brain stimulation, we usually have two electrodes, and one of these electrodes go on the head somewhere that we want to stimulate, and the other one, depending on the type of stimulation that we want to have, might go on the head or somewhere on the body. So shoulders are very common to use, or wrist, and in some cases laps. So I'm going to go through the different elements that we have in electrical brain stimulation and briefly explain you what different elements are. So we have different types of electrodes. They could come in different shapes. So for example, a conventional rectangular shape or in form of circles. And they also have different sizes. And these are carbon electrodes that they are highly conductive, and they are usually inserted into sponges, and we soak these sponges with saline solution. This helps the connectivity between the electrodes and the scalp. And then we have electrodes, we have cables that go inside the electrodes to connect the electrode to the device. And we also have some straps, different types of straps to hold the electrodes on place. Usually these types of straps are used, so these are rubber band straps, and they have holes and they are fastened using these kind of pins. But what I usually use is this kind of elastic bands, and they are self-adhesive, but over time they lose their stickiness, and we use sports clip to keep them in place. We also need to use measuring tape to find the brain area that we want to stimulate on the head, and we have a marker to mark the area that we want to put the electrode on. We have cotton pads. These are used to apply this gel to the area that we want to stimulate, and this gel is used to clean the area and also help with connectivity. And finally, we have saline solution. This is basically salt water that is conductive and helps with the connection between electrode and the skin. We have a little bit of preparation before participants come to the lab. We need to prepare our electrodes, so which means we need to put the cable inside the carbon electrode, and also we need to put the carbon electrode inside the sponge. Depending on the protocol that we need to use, we prepare our electrodes. For example, the size of the electrode and the shape of it, and also number of electrodes that we need. We also need to cut the bandages to the length that we need for our montage, for our electrode placement. So if we want to put one electrode on the head and one electrode on the wrist, we cut the bandage for the wrist a bit shorter than what we need for the head. We also need to have our cotton pads and we need to have our gel for cleaning the area. We usually put the saline solution in a cup because it is easier to access it. We sometimes need to soak the electrodes in the water, in the saline solution, and having it in the cup make it easier. We also need to have a measuring tape because we need to measure the head, and we have our sports clip because we need to hold the bandages in place, and we use these clips. And finally, we need to have some paper towels. These towels are used to avoid spilling the water on the clothes of the participant. We run majority of our electrical brain stimulation studies in our department using a device like this. This device have different shapes. It comes with different specifications. So for example, this device doesn't have input-output as you can see on this device. Now I'm going to explain you how to use the device. So this device comes with an on-off button, which is in this side, and it has 5 ports on this side. This port is for the charger, and then we have 4 ports in here. 2 of the ports are for the 2 electrodes that you use, and the other 2 are for this tiny device that is used to connect the brain stimulator to the computer. The electrodes that we have here, they are red and blue, and they go to the corresponding port in here. So red electrode is connected to the red port, and the blue electrode is connected to the blue port. I turn the device on. When you turn on the device, it spends a few seconds to boot up the device, and it also shows you the amounts of charge that the device has in its battery. And then it goes to the menu. This device comes with 4 buttons. The 2 buttons on the left are used to go up and down, and the 2 buttons on the right are for going right and left. We have multiple menus in here. I'm going to explain you each menu individually, and I'm going to show you how you can set up different protocols of electrical brain stimulation using this device. So I turn the device on now. Here it indicates the version of the device and also the serial number, and also how much battery we have in the device, and a bit of warning and information that we need to make sure that we know what we are going to do with the device. Otherwise, it could be quite harmful for the participant. So, as I said, we have 4 buttons here. The 2 on the left are to go up and down in the menu. And the 2 on the right are to go left and right. And also, these buttons are used to adjust the specifications. So for example, we can increase the values or we can decrease the values. Something that you need to bear in mind using this device is these buttons are a bit sensitive in a weird way. If you press them too hard and like this, it won't work like that. It doesn't change anything. You need to be a bit more patient with it. So you press, hold down, press, hold down, press, hold down. By too quickly pressing down, it will not detect your button presses. So let me quickly explain you different types of brain stimulations that this device can deliver. We have TDCS, which is the most conventional type of brain stimulation, which stands for transcranial direct current stimulation. We have pulse mode brain stimulation, which is basically a square wave. It is on, off, on, off. We have sinusoidal brain stimulation, which is a sine wave that is delivered to the electrodes. For this type of brain stimulation, sinusoidal, we have multiple menus because we can adjust multiple parameters using different types of stimulation. Sinusoidal brain stimulation is also called transcranial alternating current stimulation, which is abbreviated as TACS or TACS. As you see here, because I didn't use the device for a moment, the device went to some sort of screen saving mode. So with the first button press, it brings out the device from screen saving, and then with the second button press, it actually reacts to the button press. So the first one brings out the device from screen saving mode, and then with the second press, it actually reacts. This is the third and last types of sinusoidal stimulation. We have noise stimulation, or alternatively it is known as random noise stimulation. We have multiple types of this stimulation. We have noise high frequency, and we have noise low frequency. This is basically a random signal that is sent to the electrodes, or it is called transcranial random noise stimulation, or TRNS. And finally, the TDCS again. In each brain stimulation method, we have a few parameters. So let's look at the parameters that we have for TDCS protocol. We can adjust the strength of the electrical current, which is indicated as current. We have the duration of a stimulation, how many seconds we want to stimulate. We have fade in and fade out parameters. These indicate how fast we want the current to reach to the maximum level from 0. So for example, fade out of 10 seconds means it takes 10 seconds from the maximum level of amplitude that we indicated in 2-3 screens before to 0. So it goes slowly down to 0. And of course, fade in means from 0 to that level. And finally, the current again. In the current menu, we can adjust the strength of the electrical current, and it is measured in microamps. So this is 1.6 milliamp or 1600 microamp, and you can increase and decrease this value using these buttons. What we usually use is 1.5 milliamp. And for the duration, here it is adjusted as 900 seconds, which is equivalent to 15 minutes of brain stimulation. We have other screens that we rarely use. The other one is when you are done with your setting, when you set the parameters that you want to use for stimulation, you come to the stimulation menu. In this screen, you see an overview of the parameters. As you see, it is a TDCS brain stimulation with currents of 1500 microamps with duration of 900 seconds and fade in and fade out of 10 seconds. And here you use these two buttons to indicate whether you want to begin the stimulation using this button corresponding to yes or Y, or you want to cancel the stimulation and go back to the main menu using this button indicating with N or no. When you press no button, it goes back to the very first menu that we didn't see it earlier. In this menu, you can have some further adjustment that we don't talk about in this video. And we can go forward to go back to the parameter screen that we can adjust the parameters of our brain stimulation. But if we are ready with the brain stimulation and we want to apply the stimulation, we press the Y button and it begins the stimulation. Electrode placement in electrical brain stimulation usually follows the rules of electrode placement in EEG system. We have 1020 international EEG electrode placement system, which is basically a system that is scaled to the head of the participant. We have two major important measurements in this scale. One is from nasal to inion. Nasal is on this small bump on the top of the nose, and inion is on the back of your head, which is a small bump that connects your head to your spine. The other major measurement is from one tragus to the other tragus. So basically, you measure the tragus to tragus, and then the length is divided into portions of 10% and 10%, or 20% and 20%. So from one electrode to the other, there is always one proportion of 10% from distance to distance, point to point. So if you go from left to right, you always consider the length of tragus to tragus. If you go from front to back, you always consider inion to nasal. And the electrodes are always 10% different. And in setup with higher number of electrodes, you can also have 5% separation between electrodes. And with lower number of electrodes, you can have 20% of electrodes, 20% distance between the two electrodes. To make the calculation easier, we have prepared a chart that you can find the measurement and then look at different scales of that measurement. So for example, to find the center of the head, or CZ, you measure from nasal to inion, and you calculate 50% or half of that measurement. So for example, if this measurement is 35 centimeter, the center will be 17.5 centimeter. So basically here you see 35 centimeter, and you look at the column related to 50%, and you found 17.5%. Now let me give you an example of how we can find a specific electrode that is actually very common to use in transcranial electrical brain stimulation, which is related to left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or left DLPFC. This electrode is called F3. So for that electrode, first you find the center of the head, and then from that point you go 20% of this measurement forward, and then again from the center of the head you go 20% to the left from this measurement, and then you create a rectangle to find the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is called F3. So let me explain this on this dummy head. So you measure from nasal to inion, and then you find 50% of that measurement, which correspond to this blue electrode. And while you are keeping the measuring tape in place, you find 20% of that measurement, and you mark again. And then you measure from ear to ear, and you need to make sure that the measuring tape goes through the first point that you marked, and you find 20% of that measurement. So now you have 3 marked positions, and you create a rectangle. Keep in mind, because we have curvature on the head, the rectangle is a bit tilted, and this will be your target area, which is F3. Now let me explain you a little bit about how labeling works in 1020 EEG electrode placement system. All the electrode placement, all the locations are labeled with letters. So we have A, we have F, we have C, we have P, and these indicate different parts of the brain. So for example, we have F, which corresponds to frontal. We have P, parietal, C, central, O, occipital, T, temporal, and A, which is anterior. So we have AF, for example, which relate to anterior frontal. And we also have Z, which indicate the midline, which is right from in the middle of the head. And all these labels end with a number. All the numbers that are odd, they refer to the left-hand side of the head, and all the numbers that are even refer to the right-hand side of the brain. For example, this is CZ, which is center in the midline, and it is central. This is C1. It is central, and it is on the left-hand side, and it is C1. Corresponding to that one, we have C2. It is on the right-hand side, and it is central. So, for example, this electrode that we found last time, it was F3, which means it is in the left-hand side and it is frontal. And these numbers, for example, C1, C2, or C1, C3, C5, the larger the number, the more lateral, or the lower you go in the head. So, for example, this is C1, this is C3, this is C5. So now we have Fadi here. He's going to help us to demonstrate the setup. So I am going to set up the montage for two very conventional electrode placements. One of them is the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is around F3, this side, and the other one is right posterior parietal cortex, which is around the back of the head on the right hand side. So first I begin with the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, DLPFC, which is F3. So as I explained before, we have two major measurements from top of the nose to the back of the head, and then we need to mark 2 points on the head using this chart. So I'm going to do that. For that, I need a measuring tape and a marker and that chart. Depending on how much hair participant has, we put the mark in smaller or bigger. Just try not to make it too big because it might be visible. So let's begin. The way that I usually hold the measuring tape, I hold the bottom of the measuring tape using this finger, the middle finger. This way I have more of my hand to hold the middle of the tape. So I put the measuring tape on top of the nose, I hold it, and then I measure to inion or back of the head. It is 37 centimeter. The best way of finding inion is to use your finger and run down your finger to find that point. So let me do this measurement again. So I put the tape on nasien, on the top of the nose there, and then I hold the tape like this and I slowly run down my finger. The moment my finger go inside, that is the point of inion. So once again, I slowly run it down. The moment that it goes inside, that is the point of inion. So in here, it is measured 37 centimeter. And then I look at this chart, 37 centimeter, half of it is 18.5. So I put a mark at 18.5. Try to make sure that that mark is aligned with the midline or the center of the head, which goes from nose to the back of the head. The second point that I need to mark is 20% forward to the front, which is, so it was 37 centimeter, 20% forward is 25.9. So now I have two marks here, and I'm going to measure from ear to ear. And when I want to do that measurement, I need to make sure that the measuring tape goes through the first mark that I put in the middle of the head. So again, I use my middle finger to hold the beginning of the tape, I use my thumb to hold the tape next to the first mark that I put, and then I measure. It is 38 centimeter. To double check, the middle point has to be in the middle of this measurement as well. So it was 38 centimeter. The middle is 19. I check. It is exactly at 19. But if it was not exactly at 19, we correct it. So if it was a bit to the left or to the right, we put another mark. Or if the difference is very tiny, we just keep it in mind that the point is a bit left or to the right. And accordingly, we also move the other dot a little bit to the left or to the right. Okay, so that point is correct, and we need to go down to the left for 20%. So it was 38 centimeter, 20% to the left hand side, it will go to 11.4, so it is around 11.5 centimeter. And we put another mark there. So we need to make sure that all the dots and the ears are in one side of the measuring tape. So right now the ears are on the left hand side of the measuring tape, and I put the second mark there, which is on the left hand side, and the first mark, the middle mark, is also on the left hand side of the tape. So now I have 3 marks. One is here, one is there, and one is here, and I create a rectangle. But you need to keep in mind, because of the curvature of the head, the rectangle is not exactly rectangle. It is a little bit like bent. So this would be the point that I will put the sensor of my electrode on. So I'm going to put this electrode on that point. That point has to go in the middle of the electrode. We found the area that we want to simulate, and we put a mark there. But before we put the electrode on that location, we need to clean the skin using this gel. This is no prep skin preparation gel. If you look at the back of the tube, you see that it is written, this gel is not recommended for use with current-inducing electrodes, such as defibrillators and neurostimulating equipment. What they mean by that is electroconvulsive therapy, which is almost 800 times stronger than the current that we induce to the skin, to the brain. So this is absolutely suitable for our purpose. Okay, depending on the amounts of hair that our participant has, we need to have more or less of the gel. So for Fadi, because he doesn't have much hair and the skin is quite like bare there, so it's not much hair over the point that we want to stimulate, we don't need too much gel. So I put a little bit of gel on the cotton pad, and we need to clean the area, but make sure that you have a linear motion and not a circular one. So we clean the area like this, and we move the hair away so that we can clean the skin, not the hair. So like skin is the important part, and because the electrodes are quite big, so this is the electrode that I'm going to use, therefore I need to clean the area almost to the size of the electrode. Okay, so I clean it, and make sure that you don't do circular motion, because it will roll up the hair and it will be difficult to put the electrode on place. Okay, so that is clean now, and we are ready to put the electrode on place. So we clean the area that we want to simulate, and now it is time to put the electrode on the head. But before that, we need to soak the electrode in saline solution. So we basically put the electrode inside the saline solution and we gently squeeze the excess saline solution. So the electrode needs to be wet but not too wet. Over time you will get a feeling how much wet it should be. And then, just to make sure that the excess of saline solution is not dripped on participant, we give a tissue to our participant to hold, and you should also have a tissue ready at hand just in case if you have too much saline solution on the electrode, because when you put it on the head it might begin dripping. The other alternative way of soaking the electrode is to use a syringe and basically taking out some of the saline solution and put it on the electrode. This is for the case that if you don't have a cup as big as this one and your electrode cannot fit inside the cup. Try not to bend your electrode too much. Although the electrodes are flexible, they are still fragile. So bending them too much might break the electrode. So this is a very good way of soaking the electrode using saline solution and syringe. It is now time for placing the electrode on the location that we marked before. So we need to put the center of the electrode on that location. And then we need to put the bandages around the electrode. At this point we need participants' help. So what I usually do is I ask my participant to hold the electrode on place while I am putting the bandage over the electrode. So if you please hold this in place. Okay. So I have two of these bandages. With the first bandage, I try to cover as much as possible from the forehead and then on the back of the head. Because forehead doesn't have hair on it, it will keep the bandage on place quite easily. To do that, then very good. And I stretch the bandage, I take it back, and then I will do the bandage. And then I will use a sports clip to keep the bandage in place. We usually use two of these to make it more secure. Okay, yeah, you can let go now. So the electrode is in place and it will not move. And we use another bandage to cover the rest of the electrode. And this time we try to go down in the back as much as possible to use the bump in the back of the head to help the bandage to stay in place. So the first bandage goes from the forehead as much as possible on the forehead to the back. This will hold the electrode in place, and the second bandage will go down on the back of the head, and it will use the bump of the head to help hold the whole thing in place. So now the electrode is fully in place and fully supported, and the whole area of the electrode is covered by the bandages. So now, as another example, I'm going to put the electrode on the right posterior parietal cortex, which is P3 in this area. The way that we do it is we measure from the nasien to inion, just as we did before. We mark the center of the head at 50%, and then we go down 20%, and then we measure from ear to ear. We match the center of the head with the middle of that measurement, and we go down to the right hand side 20%, and then we create a rectangle again. So I will do this measurement again. So from the top of the nose, I use my thumb to hold the tape in place. I use my finger to find the union point. I run down my finger. I find that point. Very good. And then look at the chart, put the mark there, and then 20% down, you look at the chart. Okay, so now I have 2 points in here that I'm going to use for our measurement. And then from ear to ear, again, make sure that the measuring tape go through the first mark that you put. So I use my thumb to adjust it with that point. I hold the measuring tape in place with my thumb, and then 38 again. So this point has to be over 19, which is there. And then we go down 20% this time. So it is 38, this measurement, and 20% more, it will be 27.3. This is 20% more from the middle. Okay, so now we have 3 points, one here, one here, and one here. And again, we create a rectangle, and you put it up there. This time, because this part is more hairy, I put a bigger mark so that I won't miss it. Okay, so now it is time to clean up the area. It has to be a linear motion, and try to clean the skin, not just the hair. And because of the size of electrode, you need to cover quite a big area. So now it is time to soak the electrode. So just as before, we make sure that we give a tissue to our participant, just in case if it begins dripping, they can dry it. So please. And we also keep a tissue like at hand, just in case if it begins dripping. So again, you need participant help. So you ask your participant to hold down the electrode while you are putting the bandages around it. Something that I want to emphasize at this point is that these electrodes have a bump on one side and a flat side. So this side that the cable goes inside the electrode has a bump. Make sure that you put the flat side of the electrode on the skin. This way the electrode will sit on the skin better. So not this side. You put the flat side on the skin. So Javadi, I put it here. Would you please hold it for me? So the electrode is on place, and it is now time to put the bandage around it. So again, just like before, we put the first bandage in a way that it covers majority of the forehead, and this time the bottom of the electrode. So this, I hold the bandage with my fingers like this. Otherwise, if I hold it like this, it will like bend the bandage. So I hold it like this with my fingers, so that when I stretch the bandage, it will stretch flat. So I put it over the forehead. I cover the bottom of the electrode, and then I will close the bandage. This time I'm going to show you how to use the sports clip. So now I'm going to explain you how to put the clips on. So again, we pass the bandage from the forehead and then from the bottom of the electrode, and then we close the bandage. So thanks, you can let go. So now this sport clip has a stretchy part. Put the first one side of the clip, hold it with one finger, make sure that you stretch it, and then you grab the other side and slowly do that. Now the clip is in place. And then the second one, you grab one side, you stretch it, you grab the other side, and then you do this behavior. This way both the clips are in place and quite secure. We also have another type. So sometimes we connect the sports clip to the bandage. So this way you don't need to connect one side of the clips anymore because they are already securely connected. So in this way you only stretch it and you connect to the other side. So let me do this now. So again, I hold one side of the clip, I stretch it, I put that, and then I hold the clip, I stretch it, and then I put it in place. So now it is very secure and the whole thing is very secure. Something that you need to pay attention is that not necessarily having the bandages tight is a better thing. We have now nicely placed the head electrode and it is time for placement of the second electrode. I have to emphasize that you need to check with your supervisor what type of montage or placement you need to use, because what I'm explaining right now is just an example of many different types of montages or placements that are well accepted. In this montage, for the second electrode I put it on the right wrist. Sometimes, depending on the hand that participant use to respond, we might put the electrode on the left wrist. Okay, so before I put the electrode on place, I need to make sure that it is clean. So I'm going to use the same cotton pad that I use for cleaning the hair on the head to clean the wrist. We can do that because the wrist is quite, it is less hairy. So if we need to have a little bit more gel on it, we use a little bit of gel, like very little, and again we clean the skin, to the size of the electrode with a linear motion, not a circular one, and we soak the electrode, we squeeze out the excess saline solution, we make sure that we give a towel or a paper towel to the participant just in case it begins dripping. So actually if you put like this, very good, and we put the electrode in this direction. Make sure that you put the flat surface on the skin, so I put it there, and I use a shorter bandage. So we have now done with the second electrode and we are ready to begin the stimulation. But before that, we need to make sure that the participant knows what is going to happen. Okay, So we have set up the electrodes, and now it is time to connect the electrodes to the device. We can connect the electrode to the device while the device is off or while the device is on. So I usually explain to the participant that when I turn on the device, it's going to beep and it's going to boot up. So if I connect the electrodes to the device before I turn it on, I make sure that participant understands that I am not going to stimulate them right there. So I connect the electrodes. So again, red cable in the red terminal and the blue cable in the blue terminal. So now I'm going to tell my participant or Fadi here that when I turn on the device, it will not begin the stimulation, right? So when I turn this on, it will not begin the stimulation. It will just boot up, okay?
Okay.
So again, it will beep and it will show some information. The battery is very important to look at. It was 50% now, so it is enough for quite a few minutes of brain stimulation. Okay, so now we go to the setting, and we have the setting already there. So we are ready to stimulate, but before we begin the stimulation, we need to make sure that participants understand what is going to happen. So when I begin the stimulation, you might feel some pins and needles or scratches right under the electrode over the skin. That is absolutely normal, and over time it will go away. But if you feel too uncomfortable, just let me know and I will stop the stimulation immediately.
Sure.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when we make sure that the participant understands and knows what is going to happen, we are ready to begin the stimulation. Now we are ready to begin the stimulation. So I press this button to go to the stimulation menu, and it reviews the parameters as I showed before, and it asks whether you would like to begin the stimulation or you want to cancel the stimulation. At this point, I ask the participant for a final time, are you happy to begin the stimulation?
Yeah.
Very good. And I press the Y button. When I press that, it will immediately show me the impedance or the connection between the two electrodes, and it begins the stimulation. I ask my participant how they feel. So how are you feeling?
It's okay. There's just a little bit of scratching on my wrist.
On your wrist? Nothing on your head?
A little bit too. Now it's starting to gradually get there.
Is it too uncomfortable?
No, it's just tickly.
Tickly?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to scratch it?
Yeah.
Before you begin the task, you need to make sure that the participant is happy with the stimulation. As I explained before, the stimulation is increased gradually. So this is the fade-in parameter. So in the protocol that I had right now, it had 10 seconds of gradual increase in the amplitude of stimulation. So we need to make sure when the stimulation reaches the maximum point, participants feel comfortable with it. How are you feeling right now?
Good.
Okay, now I will explain you the details of the screen that you see while you are stimulating your participant. So this is the screen that reviews the parameters, and then here it asks whether you would like to begin the stimulation or you want to cancel the stimulation. So first you ask your participant whether they are happy with the stimulation. Are you happy, Fadi?
Yeah.
So they are happy, and then you begin the stimulation. When I press this button, it will show the impedance. So pay attention closely. Impedance is 4.9 kilo ohms. And then it goes to the screen showing the amplitude of the stimulation. As you see, it is increasing slowly until almost 1500 microamps. So this happened over 10 seconds. That was the fade-in period. And here you see the duration that is left from the stimulation. This is the voltage of stimulation. You don't need to be worried about that. And this is the impedance between the two electrodes. If this number gets too high, for example, more than 10 kilo ohm, you need to make sure that the participant feel comfortable with the stimulation. Check this with your supervisor. Sometimes supervisors try to keep the stimulation impedance lower than a certain number. So usually less than 10 kilo ohm is absolutely fine. And to stop this stimulation, you see a cross there, and you can press this button to stop the stimulation. Meanwhile, you also see the battery level. If it becomes blinking, it means the device is about to lose battery. So I stop the stimulation, and it goes back to the parameter screen. So now, when you want to remove the electrode, you need to make sure that you are holding the electrode down in place. Otherwise, it will jump. So I hold the electrode in place, I remove the clips slowly and slowly, and I make sure that I hold the bandage also when I am removing it, just to make sure that it doesn't fall on participant's face or it doesn't jump away. So it is secure. Yes, I move it away. And for this one, I hold the electrode and the bandage. I remove the clips one by one. As you see, the bandage is already detached, and I need to slowly remove it while holding the electrode in place. We are done with the session, and it is now time to clean up the electrodes. We make sure that this side of the cables are not exposed to water, because water will damage the port. So I usually put them around my neck, just being away from the water, and I wash the electrodes. If I have multiple sessions of stimulation, I do not take out the sponges and the electrode, and I do not detach the cable. So I keep them as they are, and I wash them. But if I am done with the stimulation for a while, like I'm not going to stimulate for a few days, I will take out the sponge, I will take out the cable as well. The way that we wash it is very simple. So we use like lukewarm water, and we wash it under the running water. You don't need to scratch it, just simply wash it like this. And the way that I remove the water and make them dry is I put the electrodes next to each other and make sure that the flat side of the electrodes are next to each other, and then you squeeze the water out. And then I use a paper towel to remove the water a bit more. So the way that I do it is I put the towel on the table, I put the flat side of the electrode down, So now the electrodes are quite like a bit damp, but they are not dripping. So you leave them to get dry. And that is how you set up the brain stimulation. You run the brain stimulation and you clean up after your brain stimulation session.